Story 1. Bayer Pharmaceuticals selling HIV-tainted medication to Africa to avoid a total loss on a product. That's as evil as anything. Edit. I remember reading about this years ago, like in high school, and it was something I never could forget. Whenever I see even the brand name, I think to myself, you all are shameful and trifling. Story 2. The Uvalde police stood outside the school as children were being slaughtered, hiding behind corners like cowards, stopping parents brave enough to attempt to get their kids from entering the school, and even arresting or threatening parents who tried to rescue their children themselves because the police were too scared to do their jobs. Story 3. I scrolled for a while and didn't see it mentioned, so I'll say the Deepwater Horizon oil spill of 2010, the BP oil spill. It was the largest oil spill ever recorded. Approximately 210 million U.S. gallons, contaminating the shoreline of 5 U.S. states. It forever damaged the Gulf of Mexico's ecosystem, killed what remained of coral in the Gulf, affected fishing and fish farming practices, and caused birth defects in generations of fish, such as stillborn dolphins and tuna with degenerative hearts. There are so many more catastrophic impacts we are still seeing today. All they did, aside from paying fines, was make apology videos and shift the blame to regular people for the environmental impact, such as driving cars, using gas, and plastic usage. Story 4. Plastic recycling. A large percentage of plastics either cannot be recycled or will not be recycled because it is not cost-effective. It was all a big lie to give the appearance of responsibility. Story 5. Andrew Wakefield was paid to fix test results supposedly linking childhood vaccines with autism. He published his tampered findings without peer review and caused the anti-autism and anti-vaccine movement that has irreparably impacted both the scientific community and the autistic population. Due to his actions, his medical license was permanently suspended, and he was banned from practicing medicine. Yet, too many people still believe his falsified information. He is responsible for the decline in vaccine trust, causing a huge increase in preventable disease deaths, and has caused great harm to autistic people everywhere due to his lies. Story 6. Karl Malone got a middle school girl pregnant when he was in college. She was 13 when she gave birth, so she may have even been 12 when he got her pregnant. Her family didn't press charges because they thought if Malone went to jail, he wouldn't be able to provide any support. However, he didn't provide any support anyway and denied being the father, even though blood tests showed he was. The court ordered him to pay $125 per week, which he said was excessive and refused to pay. Notably, his career earnings were well over $100 million. When the child was in high school, Malone met him and told him they would never have a relationship. Then, when that child signed a $30 million contract with the Philadelphia Eagles, Malone suddenly wanted to mend fences. Malone's actions are disgraceful, and it's absurd that the National Collegiate Athletic Association continues to have an award named for him. Story 7. Wirecard fraud, Germany. Olaf Scholz is now the Chancellor of Germany and was deeply involved in it. He says he doesn't remember what he talked about with Marsalek in their meetings. Marsalek was one of the heads of Wirecard and turned out to be a Russian spy. Story 8. The actions that led to the 2008 financial crisis and the bailouts essentially meant those responsible did not lose their money, and the rest of us suffered. Story 9. Iran-Contra. Illegal arms sales to Iran, the money used to fund the Contras, all sanctioned by the highest levels of the United States government. Story 10. Khalif Browder spent 800 days in solitary confinement on Rikers Island without a fair trial, or a trial at all, for allegedly stealing a backpack. He went through hell, and when he was finally released, he killed himself. There is a documentary about it that will break your heart and enrage you. Story 11. Kobe Bryant's rape accusation and Paul Walker's grooming of a 16-year-old were quickly forgotten after their deaths. Also, Asia Argento, one of the first actresses to start the Me Too movement, sexually assaulted a minor. Story 12. Autism Speaks, their connections to the Judge Rotenberg Center and white supremacists, and promotion of eugenics, filicide, anti-vaccine conspiracies, misinformation about autism, and their effort to pretend they are not a group of evil people. Autism Speaks cares more about making money than actually advocating for autistic people, as most of the money they raise goes to themselves. They push bogus autism cures like feeding children bleach and they perpetuate the myth that vaccines cause autism. Their board consists of 0 autistic people, and their founder has gone on record stating that she wishes she could murder her own autistic child. They have been connected with Soldiers of Odin, an anti-immigrant white supremacy group. They are also in support of the Judge Rotenberg Center, a treatment facility that has a history of violence towards their patients, including the use of electroshock therapy, verbal and physical abuse, and torture. The center is also responsible for the deaths of at least 6 patients. Story 13. The America First Committee in the late 1930s to early 1940s, and how several dozen members of the United States Congress in both parties were on Hitler's payroll to spread Nazi propaganda on the taxpayer dime. Precisely 0 members of the government were convicted, and the whole thing was quietly buried by President Truman. Story 14. Jacob Zuma is a former president of South Africa. He is a criminal and was accused of rape. In court, when questioned, he claimed he would not have gotten AIDS from her because he showered afterward. Story 15. The Enron scandal. It is one of the most massive corporate frauds in history, and it is insane how a whole company could be built on lies, fake financial statements, and outright deception. Story 16. The Me Too movement co-founder Asia Argento was credibly accused of statutory rape against a 16-year-old boy when she was 36. The boy had emails, text messages, and told multiple people about it at the time. Argento paid the boy almost $400,000 after threatening him with ruining his career if he said anything. Later on, after news of the scandal came to light, Argento went on the attack, saying that the boy was the aggressor, that he pursued and chased her. She also said that she had never paid the boy off, but that her boyfriend, Anthony Bourdain, was the one to give the boy the money to keep quiet. Nobody in the movement called her out on this blatant victim blaming or called her on her stunning levels of hypocrisy. One actress did, but she later took it all back and said she regretted her harsh words about her friend. In fact, the founder of the movement said, "There is no ideal victim," in reference to Asia Argento, and why we shouldn't be upset with her taking a boy 20 years younger than her to bed. Story 17. State-sanctioned murder of Jamal Khashoggi in the Saudi consulate of Istanbul. Donald Trump went on to show public support for the Crown Prince despite essentially admitting to ordering this assassination. Story 18. They were selling luxury condominiums that didn't exist and never would exist. People would take out mortgages to pay for them with the assumption that the sale of the property would fund their retirement. The condominiums were never built. People were paying mortgages for fake property. When they got caught, suddenly the heads of the company were missing, and all of the money was gone. A significant percentage of the Chinese population is still responsible for property that has been proven not to exist. Now the company is being liquidated to pay off as many debts as possible, but they won't be able to pay all of them. Story 19. German here. What Germany does right now to vulnerable local staff and contractors who helped the German army in the war in Afghanistan. This is one of the first times that organizations from the left, pro-ASL, and the right, Federal Armed Forces Association, fight hand in hand for the same issue, and the German public just doesn't care. This is heartbreaking and infuriating. Story 20. Trump's phone call. What I want to do is this. I just want to find 11,780 votes. But yeah, probably not forgotten. Partisan people don't care. Story 21. In England, we had a prime minister not too long ago called Liz Truss. She had a big circle of cronies that all invested in the pound going down in value. She sank the pound, and her friends made loads of money. Then she disappeared, never to be spoken of again. Story 22. The whole war on drugs. Major parts of war on terror, Afghanistan, Iraq, and Libya are way worse now than before they were helped by the West. And let's not mention Syria. The whole war on sex education, computer games, song lyrics, and other think of the children nonsense, perpetrated by self-appointed, corrupt, religious people who are perfectly okay with covering for the real threats to children, priests, doctors, wrestling coaches, teachers. Story 23. I keep shaking my head at how people believed Kobe Bryant wasn't guilty of sexual assault because he was able to pay off the woman in the end. That and Anthony Kiedis openly discussing having sex with minors. People want to forget things if they like something you do. Story 24. NARA testimony. The United States government basically hired a public relations company to fabricate the baby killing story, which supposedly gave the United States justification to take military action against the Iraqi government during the Gulf War. Story 25. Even though everyone cites Jimmy Savile as the worst predator in the United Kingdom, and rightly so, I do think that the sheer prevalence of outing him post-death, along with dramatizations like The Reckoning, has put the British Broadcasting Corporation off the hook. There are still hundreds of people who knew about Savile, who either knew and said nothing, who knew and were complicit, or were even active participants who have yet to be identified and prosecuted. It is as if Savile is enough and that is all that was needed. People may cite Operation Yewtree, and yes, that investigation got the likes of Rolf Harris and Stuart Hall, yet it did not unmask Hugh Edwards, who was a very prevalent predator who probably did stories on the subject while hiding his crimes. It also did not unmask all of those enablers who helped Savile, or whom Savile helped too. I do believe, for example, that there is more to Jim'll Fix It than people think. What is worse is that there is speculation to believe that there are more high-profile people within these institutions who are getting away with these sick crimes and will not be outed until after their deaths. Just like Savile, they will escape any kind of criminal prosecution. How long will it take for us to say that this is enough? How many more children and adults must be victims of such terrible crimes until people are held to account? Story 26. DuPont has poisoned multiple communities with toxic and carcinogenic chemicals, and they continue to operate today. They are the scum of the earth. Story 27. We witnessed the greatest transfer of wealth in human history during the pandemic, where representatives from both ends of the political aisle smiled at us while they took that money, and people still wanted to argue with each other about identity politics for 4 years after. Fact. There has been exactly one politician over the past decade who has actually talked about passing the costs up to the higher levels in a substantial manner, and he was bullied out of even getting a chance to run for office twice. Both sides are the same, sick and tired of sticking our heads in the sand and telling ourselves there's only one bad guy. Story 28. Reagan, before the 1980 election between him and Jimmy Carter, blocked American hostages from coming home from Iran. He broke a deal with Iran to keep them until after the election. He was then able to spin the narrative that Carter was bad on foreign affairs. Reagan then went on to win and enact some of the worst policies in American history. What Reagan did was treasonous. Story 29. The Central Intelligence Agency imported cocaine to sell to black communities in various low-income socioeconomic areas in order to help fund a civil war in at least one South American country in the 1980s and 1990s. Story 30. Allen and Polanski. I simply can't comprehend why they are both still making movies. Either people don't care or they have just forgotten. I find it genuinely hard to wrap my head around why they are still working and why people are working with them. I'm suspicious of the people who happily work with them too. It's especially weird when people say, accusations ruin a man's life, when it clearly hasn't. On the same note, the Jimmy Savile and British Broadcasting Corporation case over here in the United Kingdom. It's probably easier to find someone from the 1970s, 1980s, or 1990s who wasn't a criminal. It feels like that has been forgotten because still now, when a celebrity is accused by many like they were, there's still a majority of people who don't believe them. We have learned nothing. Story 31. Jared Kushner receiving $2 billion in cash from Saudi Arabia after Trump left office. January 6th and the fraudulent electors' scheme to attempt a coup, including Trump replacing top officials at the Pentagon in the days leading up to it. Trump pardoning people who lied to the Federal Bureau of Investigation during an investigation into himself. Trump pressuring Ukraine to open fraudulent investigations into his political rival. Trump's mishandling of COVID-19, including suggesting that people inject bleach. Trump telling the Georgia Secretary of State to find him enough votes to win the state. Trump telling his Department of Justice to announce fraudulent investigations into the election he lost so he can take care of the rest. Trump literally stealing national security secrets, including nuclear secrets, and keeping them in his bathroom and in a basement room with a copier. Then lying to the Federal Bureau of Investigation about having returned them and destroying evidence of him having moved them purposefully to hide them. Trump campaign managers and children knowingly meeting with agents of the Russian government specifically to get assistance in the election from them. Also publicly asking for their assistance in hacking a political opponent and offering to reward them if they do. The treatment of migrants under Trump's administration, including but not limited to losing children and not being able to return them to their families once taken into custody, allegations of forced involuntary surgery on migrants, and the inhumane treatment in detention facilities. Trump asking about nuking hurricanes. Trump using a Sharpie to change the forecast of a hurricane because he misspoke. Trump lying about attendance at his inauguration. Trump refusing to condemn extremist groups like the Proud Boys and instead telling them to stand by. Using the military to gas and violently clear out legal peaceful protesters to allow him to take a photo shoot at a church. Trump being found liable for rape. Trump being convicted of a felony for election fraud related to paying off a porn star he slept with while his wife had just given birth. Trump and family being found to have fraudulently stolen funds from charity and no longer being legally allowed to run a charity. Trump selling pardons for money. Trump putting family members in charge of major government actions in clear violation of anti-nepotism laws, and then overriding the security clearance process to give his family clearances after they were denied them. I am sure there is more, but this is what I recall off the top of my head.